Good morning to everyone, those that are here and those that are participating on the Zoom. Start with the Parsha. So we know that Rashi, when you study Chumash, you run into difficulty, you trust Rashi to get you out of it. He usually does a good job. And whatever Rashi finds is a question that someone learning Chumash on a very basic level will come up with, Rashi asks the question. If he doesn't know the answer, he still asks the question and he says, I don't know. And we had in the end of last week's Parsha, it says that Yaakov went to the house of Lavan, who was the brother of Rivka. He was sent to go to Haran, to the house of Lavan. He was the brother of Rivka, the mother of Yaakov and Esau. So Rashi picks up on the fact that why suddenly would we want to know that Rivka was the mother of Yaakov and Esau? We know that already at the beginning of the sentence. So Rashi says, I don't know what this teaches us. Obviously, the Torah is trying to teach us something with these words. And I don't know the answer. And Rashi is not embarrassed to say that he doesn't know the answer. So how is it that in this week's Seder, there's a question that is like the elephant in the room, very obvious question, and Rashi doesn't pick it up at all. And that is, in this week's Seder, Yaakov marries two sisters, Rachel and Leah. And we know that the others kept the entire Torah before it was given. And one of the 365 negative commandments in the Torah is the Isha Lachaysa Loisika. Forbidden to marry two sisters. So how can Yaakov Avinu, keeping the entire Torah, have married two sisters? Many of the other Mefarshim talk about it, but Rashi doesn't say a word about it. So obviously Rashi seems to feel that the answer is so obvious that anybody with a bit of common sense will work it out themselves. He doesn't need to get involved. But it seems to be a tough question. Many Mefarshim struggle with. And it's hard to see how it's an obvious answer that Rashi doesn't have any need to explain it because it's so obvious that we're going to figure it out. But, the Ramban gives a famous answer that Yaakov Avinu kept the whole Torah only in Eretz Yisrael. When he went to Chutz La'aretz, he wasn't bound by this sentence of keeping the whole Torah. Only applied in Eretz Yisrael, not in Chutz. And since Yaakov Avinu married Rachel and Leah, he was in Chutz La'aretz. So therefore, he was okay. And some of the Mefarshim actually say that that's why when he came to Eretz Yisrael, Rachel passed away, right? Because he couldn't be married to two sisters in Eretz Yisrael. But the Ramban clearly says that Yaakov Avinu kept the Torah only in Eretz Yisrael, and now he was Chutz La'aretz and therefore. So the question is, would that work for Rashi? So we know that Parshas Vayishlach was a long time ago, almost a full year ago. But most of us probably remember a very famous Rashi in Parshas Vayishlach. When Rashi picks up on the first words of Parshas Vayishlach, love on Gardi, right at the beginning of the Parsha. And he says that Gardi has a numerical value of 613, which means that although I sojourned with Lavan was a Russia, nevertheless, I retained my commitment to the 613 years. So it's clear from Rashi that Rashi's of the opinion that Yaakov Avinu kept 630, not only in Eretz Yisrael, but also in Chutz La'aretz. In Lavan Gardi, but Tayagnos Shemai. So then the Ramban teretz that Yaakov Avinu was allowed to marry two sisters because he was in Chutz La'aretz surely wouldn't work according to Rashi. Sure. So that makes the question double.
Yeah, and also can we assume that not only
not necessarily, depending on how you answer the question. Okay. Huh? Yeah, the question was about Bilhah and Zilpah, and so I just said that makes the question stronger. But we're going to focus now on Rachel and Leah. So there is another answer, also quite well known. It's brought in the Sefer Parshas Drachim, the name of the Marash Yaakov. He says Yaakov Avinu married sisters, Rachel and Leah, Bilhah and Zilpah, because he was instructed to by Hashem. Al pi adibur. And if you're instructed to by Hashem, you have to do what Hashem tells you, even if it violates something which would ordinarily be considered a negative mitzvah of the Torah. So that's an easy answer. It absolves him from everything because Hashem told him what to do, and just do what Hashem says. However, the question is, again, if Rashi is learning Pshutei Shel Mikra, learning the simple meaning of the Psukim and Chumash with a young child, could accept such an answer. And could he expect the child to figure it out by himself? So we have to ask ourselves, when we learn simple learning Chumash and Rashi, simple learning Chumash, what's the impression that we get? Why did Yaakov marry the wives that he married? So the answer is very simple. Why did he marry Rachel? It says in the pasuk, "Vayehav Yaakov es Rachel." Yaakov loved Rachel, and he approached Lavan and he said, "I want to work for you for 7 years. But Rachel b'tchak Tanya, for your younger daughter Rachel." So it says why Yaakov married Rachel. He married Rachel because he loved her, right? Why did he marry Leah? We know why he married Leah, because Lavan tricked him. Why did he marry Bilhah? It says clearly in the pasuk why he married Bilhah, because Rachel told him to marry Bilhah. And why did he marry Zilpah? Because Leah suggested that he marry Zilpah. So he married, the pasuk says very clearly the reasons for marrying these wives. It doesn't say anywhere that Hashem told him. So unless Rashi would say to the child learning Chumash, hold it a minute, I want you to know there's another layer over here that you're not aware of. This is all orchestrated by Hashem, and Hashem directed Yaakov who he should marry. Where should the child learning Chumash, where should it even enter his mind such a thought that Yaakov was instructed by Hashem who to marry? And the pasuk clearly says otherwise. The pasuk clearly says that he married Rachel because he loved her, he married Leah because Lavan tricked him, and he married Bilhah and Zilpah because Rachel and Leah suggested it and encouraged him. There is another answer, also brought in Parshas Drachim, the name of the Mashiach, which is a little bit more complicated. And that is prefaced by a question. When we say that the others kept the entire Torah before it was given, when they say that the others kept the entire Torah before it was given, what does it mean? Does it mean that they only kept it as a stringency? In other words, halachically, they were considered like Bnei Noach, all the rest of humankind. But they took upon themselves a stringency to also keep the 613 mitzvahs. Or does it mean that by accepting the 613 mitzvahs, their status was changed, and they got a halachic status of a Jew keeping 613 mitzvahs? What would be the difference? The difference would be, what if there was a case where one who keeps Sheva mitzvahs Bnei Noach is forbidden to do a certain thing, and a Jew who keeps 613 mitzvahs is permitted to do it? What would be an example of that? I'll give you an example according to some opinions. If a guy is not allowed, one of the 7 mitzvahs Bnei Noach is Eber Achai, forbidden to eat a limb of a living animal. Right? So if the animal is shot dead, or dies naturally, or slaughtered, and take off a limb and eat from it, that's fine. But while the animal is alive, to pull off a limb from the animal, eat from it, it's forbidden. Or even if somebody else pulled the limb off, or the limb fell off by itself, as long as the animal is alive, that's called Eber Menachah. What happens if the animal was slaughtered? Kosher shchita. And we know that after the shchita, the animal still moves around because the nerves are still active. So there's life in the animal to a certain extent, but it's already been shechted. So according to most opinions, for a guy it would be forbidden because it's Eber Menachai, limb of a living animal. But for a yid, since a yid has a mitzvah of shchita, perform the mitzvah of shchita, Now, after Shechita, he's allowed to eat bread. So that's an example of something which would be a lenience for a Yid and a stringency for a Goy. So where would the Avos and the Imais, when they accepted upon themselves to keep Taryag mitzvahs, where would they fit in of it? Do we say that they accepted upon, they were halachically considered like Bnei Noach, but they took on a stringency of the Shabbat mitzvahs, of the Taryag mitzvahs? Or do we say that their halachic status was changed to be a halachic Jew that has 613 mitzvahs obligation, and therefore even leniencies that come out as a result of that would also apply? Question is clear? So once we understand that question, should we assume that the leniencies would also apply to them? Then we have an answer to our question. Why? There's a din in the Gemara, that Gersh and his Gayer, a convert, non-Jew who converts, is considered like a newborn child. He has no relationship with his past whatsoever. So he's no father, no mother, no brothers, no sisters. He's a new existence. And therefore, in theory, if a brother and a sister, non-Jewish, two non-Jewish siblings, brother and a sister, convert, proper conversion, be Allah, and then they should want to, for some reason, they want to marry each other. So, in basic Torah law, there's no reason why they can't marry each other. Because they have no father, they have no mother, then the brothers have no sister. They're a new existence. They're not related to each other. Gershon is Gayer Kekatmishanet. A Ger who's Magayer is like a newborn. So if that's the case, we have an answer. Yaakov, when he married Rachel and Leah, he didn't marry Shiksus. They were surely Magayer. So since they were Magayer, they became Kekatmishanet. They became like a newborn child. So they're no longer related to each other. So Yaakov didn't marry sisters. He married two Vayeitzei who were not related to each other. That would work if we were to accept the possibility that they had a halacha of Yidden, and all the laws that apply to a Yid who keeps Taryag mitzvah after Matan Torah apply to the others before Matan. Before they married Yaakov. Yaakov kept the whole Torah. He wasn't going to marry non-Jewish women. It was surely Magayer. Magayer before they married him. So now they're Magayer. They became new people. They're not related to anybody. Question is, can Rashi accept that in the pasuk as the answer? Does a 5-year-old child learning Chumash with Rashi think this way? Does he know this? Especially if he hasn't been told. So let's go through the whole Chumash with Rashi and find if anywhere does it say in Chumash that a convert who converts is considered like a newborn child. The answer is it doesn't. Not in any pasuk and not in any Rashi. This is first found in the Gemara. 5-year-old child was learning Chumash with Rashi. Doesn't. He didn't learn Shulchan Aruch yet, and it doesn't. It's not something that he'll guess on his own. This is it's a big chiddush. I mean, logically, two people that were born from the same father and the same mother are siblings. Unless somebody tells me otherwise, I'm going to assume that two people born from the same father and the same mother are siblings for all matters. The father and the mother were married before. When they weren't married halacha, they had a child. That child is still considered the child of that father and that mother. Right? Assuming the father is Jewish and the mother is Jewish. Yeah. Then if they get married at the Pupping condition and they have another child, those two children are considered 100% siblings. Okay. The only exception would be in the case of Gedi. Okay? And there's no way that a 5-year-old child learning Tanakh would know, learning Chumash would know. Besides that, it's not so simple to say that the Avos were accepted the Taryag mitzvahs and therefore they changed their status, that they're no longer B'nai Noach. In fact, the pasuk says quite clearly that Avram, Yitzchak, the Eibishter said to Yitzchak, that I'm going to look after you in the merit of your father Avram, who kept Eikev Hasham Avram B'Keli, but Yishmer Mishmarti Mitzvah Seichu Kaisei V'Seirois. So it seems to imply that Avram Avinu deserves extra credit for keeping Torah mitzvahs, despite the fact that he was not obligated to keep Torah mitzvahs. So it's a chumrah, it's a stringency that he accepted upon himself. Furthermore, it says at the end of, it says in Parshas Lach, when Hashem told Avram Avinu by the Bris Bein Absarim that Ger Yiyeh Zaracha Be'eretz Lo Lohem, your offspring are going to be strangers in a foreign land, and they're going to be enslaved over there, and they'll be persecuted over there for 400 years. And then the nation that will enslave them and persecute them, I will judge. They will come out with great wealth. But Hashem says to Avram, but you will come to your fathers in peace. You will be buried in good old age. So Hashem says to Abraham, all this prediction was going to happen to your descendants. That's only going to happen after you pass on. You will return to your fathers in peace, and you will be buried in good old age. So Rashi wants to know, you're going to come to your fathers. Who's Avram's father? Avram's father is Terach. Terach was an idol worship. Why would Avram be interested in returning to his father? His father's an idol worship. Says Rashi Mikan, from here we learn, Terach as the children. As the Terach children. The Terach the children. Right? And that's the Seva Toiva of Avram. Yeah, and that's good news for Avram. A Terach the children. His father, Terach the children. So what does this pasuk imply? Is Terach Avram's father? It doesn't matter if he became a guy or didn't become a guy. Avram was a guy, right? So is Terach still Avram's father? That's what it seems from Rashi. Refers to Terach, Avram's father. And Avram, it's good news to Avram that the Terach the children, and he'll return to his father in peace. So does this pasuk imply that Avram Avinu became completely unrelated to Terach when he was Megai? No. So in simple understanding of the Chumash, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, are considered to be related to their parents and their siblings. So this doesn't seem to work according to Rashi, the way he's learning the simple Chumash. Okay? So then the question is, so what do we do with that question? How did Yaakov marry two sisters? And there must be, as we said before, such an obvious answer that Rashi doesn't need to enlighten us, because we can figure it out with our own common sense. So how does that help Yaakov have a heter to marry two sisters? Somebody comes to a Rav today and says, I want to marry my wife's sister because she marry Vayeitzei. That's a heter to do so? No. So how did Yaakov marry two sisters? And besides, the second one that he married was Rachel. He did it because of the deception, but does that make it a heter? So let's try to work it out. Is there any way that we can find a heter for Yaakov Avinu because of the deception, or for any other reason? Yeah. Correct. Mm-hmm. Correct. Which reminds me of another point that we didn't mention. Thank you for reminding me. When we were discussing the concept of Gershon as Gaia Kekapish and Leah, we can use that as an explanation, right? So it's very, very, very interesting you pointed this out. When the Torah forbids marrying two sisters, not a chayk. Torah says clearly why. It says the isha lachaysa lo yisika, shouldn't marry two sisters. Why? Litzra. Now the word litzra has the, what's the root of the word litzra? The root is tzara. Right? What does it tzara mean in a family structure? A co-wife. If a man marries two wives, how are they related to each other? Right? We know there's a brother, there's a sister, there's an uncle, there's an aunt, there's a sister-in-law, mother-in-law, father-in-law, a lot of aunts, uncles, all kinds of different relationships. What's the relationship that two co-wives have to each other? They're called tzara. You remember in the story of Elkanah and Pnina and Chana, over there the pasuk uses the word very freely. Right? So the isha lachaysa loisikach ulitzrer, you're not allowed to take two sisters who naturally have a liking for each other, a friendliness for each other, a love for each other, and turn them into tsaros who are going to naturally have an anxiety with each other, a tension with each other, maybe even a hatred. So if that's the point, then logically speaking, even if there was some kind of a heter in the case of a gersh and his guy to cut with the leila, where you could find a lenience to go against other halachas that have to do with relation, that have to do with family. But when it comes to this issue, where the Torah says clearly the reason is because you're taking two sisters that naturally love each other, and you're turning them into competitors. So two Vayeitzei, who are sisters, also have the natural love for each other. So even then, it would be a problem. It appears. So it's surely not such a simple. So let's come back to how does Rashi expect us to solve this problem without having to tell us anything? It's just so obvious. So the answer is very simple. The others took on a stringency of keeping Taryag mitzvahs. Right? It was a chumrah for them. They were not obligated to Taryag mitzvahs. They were before Matan Torah. They took on a chumrah to keep Taryag mitzvahs. Now, if somebody takes on a chumrah, and this chumrah in a certain situation contradicts an obligation, contradicts a halach, can you take a chumrah that contradicts a halach? I'll give you a simple example. Let's say somebody has their own siddur. They daven best from their own siddur. So they only daven from this siddur. Comes a Shabbos, and they're in a city where there's no Eid. They want to carry their siddur to shul because they have a chumrah to daven only from their siddur. Do they do that? A chumrah can only be to go beyond the letter of the law. But you can't do a chumrah to go against the law. That's obvious, right? That's obvious, common sense? Yeah. So if the others accepted upon themselves to keep the Taryag mitzvahs as a chumrah, it's clear that they can only do so if it didn't go against an obligation which was there before. This is actually the simple explanation. There are other explanations, but the very simple explanation. For the famous question, Avraham Avinu at the age of 99, the Eibishter appears to Avraham Avinu, and he says to him, go and get yourself circumcised. So we say, 1 minute. Avraham kept the whole Torah, didn't he? If Avraham kept the whole Torah, why wasn't he circumcised before the age of 99? He kept all the mitzvahs, right? One of the mitzvahs is circumcision. So why wasn't he circumcised before 99? And there are many answers. But the very simple answer, it says in Parshas Noach, after the flood, Hashem told Noach the rules by which mankind should abide. We call the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. One of the things he told him is, you're not allowed to murder. And then he said to him, Bezdimchem l'nafsheseichem edrosh. I will hold you responsible for your blood, for your soul. Yeah? What does that mean? Says Rashi, Zeh hashefech dam. That refers to someone who spills his own blood. How do we normally understand that? What is it referring to? Suicide. Yeah? Why do we think it means suicide? Yeah. Zeh hashefech dam atzmai, one who spills his own blood. What if somebody injures himself intentionally? Is he spilling his own blood? Yeah. And if he injures himself in a way that puts himself in danger, that's spilling your own blood that borders on possible doing harm to yourself, right? So the simple meaning of the pasuk is that it was forbidden for a ben to cause himself injury, to cut his flesh in a way that will cause blood to flow. Is a shefech dam atzma. So Avraham Avinu, based on the laws of Bnei Noach, was not permitted to cause himself injury, cause himself to bleed, unless it was for medicinal purposes or whatever. So if Avraham Avinu wants to take on a chumrah to keep the Tayag mitzvahs, one of the Tayag mitzvahs is the mitzvah of Miro. So Avraham Avinu has to go and perform surgery on himself in order to fulfill the mitzvah of Miro, right? Is that permissible for a ben noach? Very questionable. Simple meaning of the pasuk is forbidden to spill your own blood. Only when Hashem comes to Avraham and tells him, go ahead and circumcise yourself, so Hashem is overruling the prohibition of a dimcha l'nafshe seichem, then Avraham can circumcise himself. One is one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, and one is one of the Tayag mitzvahs. So the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach apply to all men. Then Hashem comes along and says, and you Yidden should do such and such. Even if it goes in the way of one of the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach, but Hashem tells you to do it. I'm not saying that in halacha that's the definition of the dimcha. I'm saying in pshutei shel mikra, the simple meaning of the psukim, that is the definition. The dimcha menashe seichem edresh zeh hashefet dama. You are addressing the question of why did Hashem wait until Avram was 99? My question was, why did Avram on his own not circumcise himself before that, just like kept all the other mitzvahs? But you're telling me why Hashem didn't tell him to do it. My question is, why didn't he do it voluntarily, just like he did all the other mitzvahs voluntarily? He should have done this mitzvah voluntarily as well. So the answer is because he understood that it says in the Torah is an obligation for Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach that requires you not to spill your own blood. So unless Hashem himself would instruct him to do otherwise, he wasn't permitted to do it. Very simple answer. Okay, let's take it one step further. There are certain things that are not included in the Sheva mitzvah b'nei Noach, but the nations of the time accepted upon themselves these stringencies. Doesn't make a difference. If they're doing it as your shliach, you're instructing them to do an aveda for you. Okay, that's a possibility, but I would imagine that if it's forbidden to spill your own blood, it's also forbidden to have someone else do it for you on your behalf. Maybe, yeah. Shlichus, if there's shlichus l'b'nayach, okay, it's a good question. Good point. I'll take your point. Fine. The question is it performed because, and when it's necessary medically, there's an exemption for it, or to do it when there's no medical need for it. And again, we're not talking halacha now. Maybe the halacha is different, but pshat in the pasuk, simple pshat in the pasuk is that it's forbidden for a ben noach to spill his own blood, and therefore Avraham Avinu was not allowed to circumcise himself, and thus Hashem demanded him to do this. Okay, now let's take that one step further. There are certain things that are not included in the Shema B'Sifrei, but the people of the time accepted it upon themselves. Now, when the entire community, especially the entire mankind, accepts a certain thing upon themselves, it acquires a status of obligation. And therefore, I'll give you an example. Just an example. The mitzvah of honoring parents, right? So we know that at the end of Parshas Noach, it says, "Vayomos terach b'chol." Terach died in Chol. Rashi says, do your maths. You'll find out that Terach died in Charan many years later. Not when Avram left Charan. It wasn't Terach died in Charan and then Hashem told Avram, leave Charan and go to Eretz Yisrael. It was many, many years later. So why does the Torah put it in the wrong order? First, it was Terach Charan, then talks about Avram's journey to the land of Canaan. So Rashi says, because the Torah doesn't want to reflect badly on it. Because otherwise, people would say, look at Abraham. He left behind an old father and son. He left to Canaan. He never came back to visit him. That's respecting your father. That's honoring your father. So therefore, the Torah puts Vayomas Terech B'Charan in Parshas Noach. Out of sight is out of mind. And it won't reflect badly on Abraham that he didn't honor his father. That's what Rashi says. So the question is, why would it reflect badly on Abraham that he didn't honor his father? Where does the mitzvah of kibbud av v'eim come in? The first time we find in the Torah the mitzvah of kibbud av v'eim is Aseret Something. Chazal tell us that in Mara, which is a short while, a few days before Machzor, they were already given the mitzvah of kibbud av v'eim. Well, who was given? The Jewish people were given in proximity to Matan Torah. So why would Avraham Avinu be expected to honor his father, and it reflects badly on him if he didn't honor his father? Furthermore, we find that Yaakov Avinu was punished for the 22 years that he didn't honor his father, because he was in Charan. Why would he be punished for something that wasn't an obligation? So from here we see quite clearly that even though it wasn't a mitzvah to honor a father and mother, but the nations of the world accepted it upon themselves to honor their parents. So since it was the common practice to honor one's parents, if Avraham Avinu did not honor his father, it would reflect badly on him. And when Yaakov Avinu did not honor his father, even though he wasn't obligated to by a mitzvah in the Torah, but he was obligated to by the common practice of the nations of the world. And if he didn't, it was an issue. Similar to what we find next week said by Shechem. Shechem abducted Dinah, and Shimon and Levi went berserk. And they said, this is unacceptable. Why is it unacceptable? Where does it say in Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach that what Shechem did is inappropriate? Dinah wasn't married. So Rashi says, that the nations of the world accepted upon themselves certain limitations in relationships as a result of the Mabul. So one of the restrictions was that the kind of thing that Shechem did to abduct a girl and take her against her will was considered unacceptable by the nations of the time. And when Shechem violated that acceptance that the nations of the world accepted upon themselves, it was considered a sin for which he was deserving of death. And Shimon and Levi went and killed him because he didn't do what he was supposed to do, and they killed the people of Shechem because they didn't stop him from doing it. So we see clearly that even something which is not one of the Shema Mitzvahs, once it becomes the accepted practice, a certain stringency, a certain positive behavior, once it becomes the accepted practice of the people of the time, becomes an obligation. Yeah? Is that clear? Everybody's with me? Okay. That's because they endangered the remainder of the Jewish people. Not because they did the wrong thing. He didn't tell me you did the wrong thing. He said, you're putting us in danger. So the there's an interesting pasuk in this week's set, which is very peculiar. After the story with Leah, right? Yaakov comes to Laban and says, I'm going to work for you for 7 years. I want to marry Rachel. And Laban says, fine, go ahead. Go into the field, work for me for 7 years. I'll let you marry her. Then the 7 years are up. Yaakov comes to Laban and he says, okay, 7 years are up. Let's go for it. So Laban says, fine. Announces making a big wedding, a big party, invites the whole city, big celebration, and the wedding goes ahead. Then, comes the next morning, Yaakov finds out he actually married Leah, not Rachel. And he comes to Laban, he's distraught. He says, I worked for you for 7 years to marry Rachel. Why did you deceive me? Why did you trick me? Why did you pull a fast one on me? Why did you give me Leah if I worked for you for Rachel? What does Laban answer? Laban answers, you have to understand, I was in this difficult situation. There's a custom here. We don't marry off our younger daughter before our older daughter. It wouldn't be this, and it wouldn't be that. And therefore, I'm sorry. Yeah. Question is, the whole conversation doesn't make any sense. Yaakov comes to Laban and he says, why did you deceive? What do you mean, why did you deceive? I'm not Jewish. I don't go by the Torah that says Midbar Sheker Tircha. I'm a professional deceiver. There's nothing in the Sheva Mitzvahs B'Nerech that says I can't deceive people. Why is Yaakov even asking him? And what does he answer? He doesn't tell Yaakov, I'm sorry, I'm not Jewish, I don't keep Torah, let's just leave me alone. He says, I have a story, I have an older daughter, a younger daughter, you have to understand, you have to forgive me. What's going on over here? So it's very clear from this conversation that at that time, there was an accepted practice amongst people that people kept their word. If I told you I'm going to do A, B, and C for you, I was expected to keep my word. If I don't keep my word, I'm a deceiver. And I'm going out of the convention that is accepted by mankind. So Yaakov came to Laban and he said, Laban, shame on you. I worked for you for 7 years. You agreed to give me Rachel. And then you give me Leah. And Laban is very uncomfortable because he knows that he's broken a convention that is accepted across the board by all of mankind. So he starts epking and bepking, and he's saying, you have to understand, an older daughter, a younger daughter, this, that, the other. So from here we see that it was an accepted practice at the time. People kept their word. Yeah. Now, Yaakov has a predicament. He finds out that unknowingly, he married Leah. But he promised Rachel he was going to marry. Okay? But at the end of the day, he gave his word to Rachel. Now the question is, what should he do? He has two choices. One choice is to come to Rachel and to say to Rachel, I know I promised I was going to marry you, but I have this chumrah that I keep Taryag mitzvah. And one of the Taryag mitzvahs is that I can't marry two sisters. And now that I married Leah, I won't be able to keep my promise to you. Right? Is he allowed to do that? Is Yaakov allowed to keep a chumrah that goes against an obligation? He has an obligation to keep his word. He gave his word to Rachel that he's going to marry. But he has a chumrah, he has a stringency that he and his father and his grandfather before him keep Taryag mitzvahs. Why do they keep Taryag mitzvahs? Nobody told them they have to. But they took on an extra stringency. So can an extra stringency that a person takes on entitle him to violate an obligation? Is the question clear? And the answer can only be, no, it doesn't entitle you to violate. You have an obligation to keep your word, you have to keep your word. If it's a halacha that you're not allowed to do something, you say, I'm sorry, the Torah doesn't permit me to do it. I'm sorry, I can't help you. But if it's not a halacha, the halacha is you only have to keep Sheva Mitzvahs B'Nei Noach until Matan Torah. And Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov come along and they say, we're going to do an extra stringency. We're going to keep Taryag mitzvah. So just like in the case of Avraham, couldn't perform circumcision because that would violate the Yazdimchem and Nafshesechem. So Yaakov couldn't refuse to marry Rachel and say to her, I'm not keeping my word to you because I have a stringency that I'm very super frum and I don't marry two sisters. That would have been unacceptable. So the correct thing for Yaakov to do, according to the Torah in this circumstance, was to marry Rachel. And it's such an obvious equation that Rashi doesn't feel any need to say it. Anybody with a bit of common sense can work it out themselves. It says clearly in the Torah that Yaakov said, Rachel wasn't aware of that. She was aware that there was a commitment to marry her. Now Yaakov is going to come along to Rachel and say, I'm sorry, I'm super frum, I'm married two sisters, and therefore I can't marry. Not acceptable. You have to keep your word. So therefore Yaakov did what he was supposed to do. That wouldn't help. It doesn't make it any less of a problem to marry a sister of one's wife after divorcing one's wife, as long as she's alive. As long as she's alive, there's no heter. Makes no difference whatsoever. If the wife passes on, and then he wants to marry the sister, that's another issue. But as long as she's alive, it's forbidden. So that wouldn't have made any difference. No, that was love. That only love on. The reason why the three sisters were. Okay, so there are people that have respect for an older sibling waited. There is a concept in halacha of asking permission. A younger sibling wants to get married for an older sibling, but there's definitely not. It's not a prohibition. It's out of respect for the feelings for the older sibling. It's appropriate to ask permission. Some people have a minhag that they first put aside the money for the wedding of the older sibling. Various things that are done to try and alleviate the pain, but it's not a prohibition. Okay, so what is there to learn from this whole discussion? Everything we have to learn something, right? It's not just to be philosophical. So the lesson is very simple. If a person wants to take on a stringency, very good thing. They have to ask themselves one question. Who's paying the price for this stringency? If I'm inconveniencing myself as a result of this stringency, that's wonderful. The Tanya says, Adam ki yakriv mikem karban Hashem. The person wants to bring an offering to Hashem from himself. But if you take on a stringency, you're not halachically obligated. You decided to take on a chumrah, stringency, at someone else's expense. Someone else is going to be inconvenienced as a result of this chumrah. Question is that a good idea? Tell the famous story that once somebody was unfortunately very ill. The whole community got together to say to him. You know, somebody got up and said, I suggest that everyone should donate some time of their life for this place. So one person got up and said, I'll give a day. And said, I'll give half a day. Said, give a week. Then somebody screamed out from the back of the school and said, 25 years. Shocked. 25 years. What's going on? He said, yeah, my mother-in-law's here. Very easy to give away somebody else's. That's not the point. The point is that you're prepared to give something away from yourself. So if you want to take on a chumrah, you have to ask yourself, who's paying the price? Who is it going to inconvenience this chumrah? The chumrah is going to inconvenience you, and you'll be blessed. But if the chumrah is going to inconvenience somebody else, then the question is, what right do you have on somebody else's account to be extra frum, and they're going to have to pay the price, right? So, and by extension, when we're called upon, there's Kanai Nahara, millions of Yidden out there don't know much about Yiddishkeit. And it's a sacred obligation on every Jew of this generation to do everything that they possibly can to reach out to a fellow Jew and to educate them and show them the beauty of Yiddishkeit. Somebody might say, it's very important for me to be insulated. I have to stay in an insulated place. I don't want to lower myself to go out to the outside world because it might defile me. So the question is, if it's an obligation, if you have such a halacha, okay. But if there's no such halacha, you want to take on a chumrah, you want to take on a stringency. On whose account are you taking on the stringency? Who's going to suffer as a result of your stringency? The other people that are not going to know anything about the beauty of Yiddishkeit as a result of your stringency. So who says that that's the right thing? Maybe it's the right thing for you to do is to reach out to a fellow Yid. And if you're worried about yourself, strengthen yourself in your commitment to Yiddishkeit. Daven harder, learn more Torah, and be stronger in your own Yiddishkeit. And in that way, first of all, you'll be in a better position, and you'll also help other Yidden be in a better position. And at the end of the day, through being actively involved in propagating Yiddishkeit, it will ultimately strengthen your own Yiddishkeit. Yes. Okay, so the question was, is reaching out to other people a halacha or a chumrah? So actually, there's a story in the Gemara, very well-known story, where there was a prospective convert that came to Hillel HaZaken, and he said to him, teach me the whole Torah. I want to convert on condition you teach me the whole Torah on one foot. Right? So first he came to Shammai, and Shammai took a stick and told him where to go, and then he came to Hillel. He said, teach me the whole Torah on one foot, and Hillel said, fine, not a problem. The whole Torah is love your fellow Jew. Right? So not only is it a mitzvah and an obligation, it's the entire Torah. As long as you follow halacha, you're not misinterpreting it. So you have to work out, and sometimes you need guidance, how to deal with each situation. But there's no question about it that the part of the equation has to be taken very seriously into consideration. Now, I should add that the Hillel didn't just say the is the whole Torah. He added one more line. He said the rest is coming. So the rest is very important. But it's a commentary of the Don't miss out on the commentary. Can't say, as long as I'm loving my fellow Jew, I'm okay, I don't have to keep anything else. No, there's another 612 mitzvahs. They're the commentary on it. So if you're asking, is it an obligation to care about another Jew? It's not only an obligation, it's an obligation which is a klal gadol b'Torah, the words of Rabbi Akiva, and the words of Hillel, kol ha'Torah kula.
Rabbi Gordon.
Yes.
Could I ask? At the beginning of the Shiur, Rabbi Gordon said that the simple reason for Yaakov marrying Rachel was because he loved her. Vayehav es Yaakov es Rachel.
It says in the pasuk. I'm saying traditional Mikra. That's what it says in the pasuk.
Right. So
if you want to learn in Tanya what that means on a deeper level, what Yaakov represented and what Rachel represented, that's another discussion. But if you're learning Chumash and Rashi, simple types. Vayehav Yaakov es Rachel, Vayemer Avot Hashem Hashem Rachel B'Tzar Tana means Yaakov loved Rachel, and therefore he approached Lavan and he said to him, "I'm going to work for you for 7 years. I want to marry your daughter." And Lavan said,
"Look, because I just want to understand how could Yaakov love Rachel when he didn't even know her? Usually say love comes after marriage and when you get to know each other, etc. So how can we understand that he loved her?"
Okay, so I would assume the answer to your question is that it says Rachel hoysa yifas payar v'ifas man, and it's Chazal say that the Yafas Payar is in the 248 positive mitzvahs, and Yafas Mara is a 365 negative mitzvahs. So Yaakov saw in Rachel incredible righteousness, incredible tzidkus, incredible holiness. Being that Yaakov was a very holy man, he was tremendously attracted to holiness, and therefore he loved Rachel. Okay, there is a deeper level of this. There's the whole sikha from the Rabbi in Parshas Vayigash about next week's Parshas Vayishlach, about Vayeitzei Dina Bas Leah. What was the avodah of Leah? What was the avodah of Rachel? And why Yaakov was more attracted to Rachel than to Leah? But that's a whole discussion for itself. We're not going to learn the whole Torah on it.
Thank you.
Okay. So we want to chop at least a little bit of time. Didn't intend for this discussion to go this long. We are looking at the approbations, the haskamas, which are on page 4 in the and the numbers on top of the page, and the Roman numerals on bottom of the page. The Tanya that I have says 15. Although maybe different Tanya say different things. So as I explained in the last shiur, the Alter Rebbe agreed with hesitation, agreed to publish the Tanya, have it printed, although originally it wasn't his intention. His intention was to have it handwritten. It's the number 4 is on top of the page, and there's a Roman numeral 15 at the bottom. So, but he insisted that it should have an approbation. 2 great tzaddikim, colleagues of his, disciples of the Maggid, Zusha of Anapoli and the Leibach. So in the right column, we have the approbation from the Zusha of Anapoli. Haskamas harav chasid hamaforsim ishal. This is an approbation from the famous rabbi and chassid, godly man, Kaddish Amalek, described as holy, Moharar Mishalom Zusul Me'anak. And he writes as follows. When I saw the writings of this great genius, Ish Elokim, Kaddish V'Torah, godly man who was holy and pure, Aspaklaria HaMe'ira, a illuminating, magnifying, the Teiv Asher Asa, and the good that he has done. And as I explained last week, and this it helped us understand why all these descriptions are being used to describe the Alter Rebbe, is because the Tanya was printed originally without the name of the author. And when you print a book without the name of the author, especially if it's a book that speaks about Avodas Hashem, the question is, can people rely on it? It's safe to follow this book. We don't know who wrote it. So therefore, the Talmidei Hamagid who wrote Haskamas were very lavish on the praise that they described the author with, so that people reading the Sefer could know that they're in safe hands with this. So of course, all these praises are true, but they were written. The reason that they needed to be written was so that the person that picks up the Sefer and learns from it can know that he's in safe hands. The Nasan Belibay Hatar is placed in his pure heart. Lasais as Kol Eila, to do all this, Hares as Am Hashem Drachav HaKodesh, to show the nation, the Almighty's nation, his holy ways. His original intention was like the Halis. Originally, the author did not plan to publish this. He did not plan to put it into print. He wanted it to remain in a notebook, handwritten notebook form. Machmas she'ein darkei b'kach, because it's not his way to take the secrets of the Torah and print them, as his rabbis before him, the Baal Shem Tov, the Maggid, didn't print Torah either. But because these notebooks spread very quickly amongst all of Israel, in many copies, they were copied over one from the other. Seifrim Mishunim, and they were by various scribes. And the word for various would be Shainim. But he writes Seifrim Mishunim, which alludes to what we spoke about last week, that there were certain people who took advantage of the fact that it was being handwritten, it was being copied over handwritten, and they falsified, they put in controversial things into the manuscripts of the Tanya to dissuade people from studying the Tanya, turn them off from it, to make them question its legitimacy. So because of this, there were so many copies coming from Seifrim Mishunim, from strange scribes. So Machmas Riboy Atokashen is because there were so many different copies, there became an immense amount of mistakes. The only way to deal with that was it was a necessity, an absolute necessity, to bring these notebooks to print and make a printed book out. The Heir Hashem es Ruach HaShutfim, Arehema Rabbani HaMuflog Abasik Marar Shalom Shachta Ve'Neach, Arehema Rabbani HaMuflog Abasik Marar Martchem Reshmul Alevi. So the Almighty aroused the hearts, the spirit of these two individuals, Reb Shalom Shachta, the son of Reb Neach, and Reb Martchem, the son of Reshmul Alevi, who both invested money and time and effort to publish the Tanya. To bring these notebooks to print in the print house in Slavita. It's well known that in Slavita there was a Hebrew publishing house run by the brothers Shapiro. The whole story that it was shut down because of slander. But at this point, the publishing house was functioning, and these two gentlemen, of Shalom Shachner, the son of Leah, and Rabbi, the son of Shmuel Alevi, put in effort to publish the Tanya by bringing it to print in the print house in Slavita. So Zusha says that for the good work, I want to commend them and thank them. However, he's going to say there was an issue of copyright. Because whenever you print a book that is successful, it's very possible that tomorrow somebody else will come along and reprint it and undercut you, and you won't be able to get back the investment. So the next topic that is going to be discussed by the Zusha in this approbation is the issue of copyright. So we've run out of time for the moment, so we'll leave this discussion for here. And should be a freilich and kindness kisla for everyone to hear good besuris on all fronts.
Amen. Thank you.
You're welcome.